Hello everyone, the Crime Life channel is with you. In this video, you will learn about the Terry Lynn case. On November 23, 1972, on Thanksgiving Day, the Hollis family was supposed to gather at a festive table. Ronald, Shirley, and their 16-year-old son Randy were already at home. It only remained to wait for the youngest member of the family, Terry Lynn. The girl left to ride a bike around 15 o'clock, but for some reason she was in no hurry to return. When it began to get dark outside, the parents' anxiety only intensified. Losing all patience, they soon dialed 911 and reported an 11-year-old child missing. Until that day, Terry Lynn had never caused her parents any problems. The girl studied well, was disciplined, had many friends, and did not stay out late. The Hollis family was prosperous, so there was no question of a voluntary escape. The police of the California city of Torrance, who arrived on call at the beginning of the 10th evening, immediately dismissed this version and admitted that they considered this case primarily as related to crime. All personnel were alerted and sent to search for Terry. In parallel, the girl's friends and classmates were interviewed who could give at least some information about her possible whereabouts. Law enforcement officers and volunteers searched all night, looking literally under every bush, but could not achieve results. Neither the girl nor her bike could be found. By morning, the whole town knew about Terry Lynn's disappearance. Still hoping to find the child alive, the police announced her signs, a description of clothes and a bicycle. Witnesses who could have seen the girl after 15 o'clock and those who were with her at that moment are also asked to respond. Barely awake, the residents of Torrance were just digesting the information about Terry's disappearance when at 10:15 a.m., the news broke like thunder. The search was stopped. With notes on the Terry Hollis case at dawn, 100 kilometers from Torrance, two men decided to brighten up their leisure time by fishing. However, they failed to do this. As soon as they got down to the shoreline, they found the body of a child lying on a rock. It was a blonde girl, and she was wearing only a white t-shirt. Instantly forgetting about their plans, the fishermen called the police to the scene. The medical examiner who examined the remains concluded that the girl had been abused and strangled. On the rocky coast, the body most likely ended up as a result of the transfer. The victim's age was determined to be 13 years old. The identity of the deceased had to be established as soon as possible, so the signs described by the specialist were compared with the list of missing children and assumed that it was Terry Lynn Hollis. The girl's parents could not participate in the identification of the body because of the stress they had experienced. Her brother was too young for this. Therefore, it was decided to involve Terry's uncle Herbert Pierce in the procedure, who, upon arriving at the morgue, confirmed the police's guesses. Strange calls 2 days after the discovery of the body in the Hollis family home, the phone rang. The voice on the other end of the line was openly laughing at what had happened to Terry and claimed to know much more about the circumstances of the crime than the others. Realizing that they might be dealing with a real killer, Ronald and Shirley immediately contacted the detective in charge of the investigation. On the same day, a listening device was installed on the phone in the family's house, to which 2 policemen were assigned. The calculation was that the anonymous person would want to provide more details and would call again. As a result of 2 more calls, the anonymous person was identified and arrested on November 30th. It turned out to be a 16-year-old teenager from a neighboring town. After seeing the Terry Lynn report on TV, he couldn't think of anything smarter than to stage a prank on the victim's parents on behalf of the real killer. The police did not appreciate the joke, and the mediocre comedian ended up at the police station for a while, where he was actively interrogated. But the seemingly promising lead turned out to be empty. The guy had nothing to do with this crime. Coastal area of Torrance, California. The first suspect having made no progress in the investigation, at the end of December 1972, the police department appointed a reward for information that would lead to the arrest of Terry Hollis's killer. By the evening of the next day, The hotline received 14 messages, but upon careful inspection, it turned out that all of them were not well off. Almost 1.5 years later, a 29-year-old local resident was arrested in nearby Gardena. He was also questioned about the Terry Lynn case. The man categorically refused to admit his guilt, but the case went to court. At the trial, his lawyer managed to prove the defendant's innocence in the murder. He was convicted only for abusing a 10-year-old boy. The Terry Lynn Hollis case was transferred to suspended status in April 1974. A DNA sample of the alleged killer was sent to the Los Angeles County Crime Lab for examination and search for matches. It will take a long 6 years before a conclusion comes from there that the sample does not match any of the criminal's database. In 2018, it was decided to check the DNA for kinship, and then the detectives were lucky. A private research laboratory in Florida was able to match a sample from the case with the Brown family. As a result of communication with the relatives of the potential killer, the police learned his name, Jake Edward Brown. He was 36 years old at the time of Terry Lynn's disappearance, who was introduced to many as Thomas Tracy Barham, was arrested in Los Angeles in April 1973 for abusing a minor. It was only 6 months after the murder of Terry Lynn. In 1974, he was arrested again for a similar crime, this time in Alameda County. In addition to an unhealthy craving for children, the repeat offender was convicted of robbery and drug possession. It turned out to be impossible to interrogate Brown himself. He had died a few years before. In 2019, investigators flew to Arizona, where he was buried, to carry out the exhumation procedure. The bones of the repeat offender went to the laboratory. The study ended with a stunning result. Experts estimated the possibility of a comparison error as 1 in 21 septillion, 24 zeros in a septillion. It took the Torrance police almost half a century to figure out who was responsible for the murder of Terry Lynn Hollis. By this time, her parents were no longer alive, but Randy's brother was able to attend a press conference dedicated to the closure of the case, and together with the detectives put an end to it. Randy Hollis at a press conference on September 11, 2019. To his right, Torrance Police Chief Eva Irwin is in uniform. "I just wish our parents were alive to see this. A lot was taken away from us then. On Thanksgiving, I always allow myself some privacy to remember Terry," Randy said. He also urged family members of victims who died as a result of unsolved crimes not to lose hope of finding out the truth.